Oh, not a name is there.
Cool. Yeah, I just did that. Hey, so 063 is out. Cool.
Yeah, I would have preferred to wait a little bit more to discuss more, and so, but then I wanted to get it out and not lose another day.
Yeah, I was slightly surprised when it came out, but like good surprise basically. So I'm just checking the forum real quick to make sure we don't have any like hot issues coming in.
I have not followed much what was going on in the forum and have hundreds of mails.
Yeah,
through, so,
I try to log in like every day. And I mean, I get like emails, you know, the last. I set up a notification so that I get emails like stuff that's happened since the last time I logged in every day, I think. So I'm pretty much keeping tabs on it now. But anyway, this can be fairly quick. I wanted to talk about GitHub stuff, Git stuff, and basically how to maximize the ability for other people to review your work and track what's going on, and ultimately I think to make your life easier as well, because now it's pretty hard to follow, and I'll show you what I mean.
Yeah, no, I'm aware I should make commits in smaller chunks and more isolated.
I actually don't think that wasn't the issue here. Let me, I'll share my screen. I'm going to bring up 1 second. Okay, so tell me when you can see this.
Yeah, see it.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I've been doing a bunch of work with the board, as you've probably seen, and it's getting into much better shape. Just like really quickly, this is not the point of this conversation, but since we're going to be in here, this column, right, priorities, I'm going to really start focusing on the board here and having people like pay more attention to it, because it's now getting into a shape where we can actually like start to manage our work based on it. It's taken me a long time to really think about, or to like figure out what I think the kind of shape of this thing should be to make it really manageable. But I've landed on this idea of a priorities column, which is just exactly like it's the outcome of our conversation the other day in Vienna, right? You know, we sat together for an hour or two. We said like, these are the things we absolutely must do. It's like the stuff that we know anyway, but like let's really capture it. And so what you see with these epics, and I've gone like all caps mode to like really emphasize these are the big things that we're up to right now, like the most important things. They're priority ordered at the top, right? So whatever's at the top of these columns is like the most important, especially in the priorities column. So it's exactly like we've talked, right? Fix timeouts, stabilize the network, get more developers, and mitigate blockchain congestion when it comes up, right?
Just one question. I opened the board and I see a different view. I only see your stuff basically. Is there somewhere filled?
So the main thing is that you should be like, what I would recommend is setting up a bookmark for this. If you see what's highlighted, bisq-network DAO, and then hashtag boards. And then when you're there,
so that's a DAO. Okay. Change. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you're there, make sure to click show all, so that you're looking at all of the repositories together.
Yeah. Now I see everything. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So when you narrow that down, right? Like if I show all the issues related to fixing timeouts, then you can see what actually got fixed in 063. Some stuff we deferred, like we didn't actually fix it in 063, but I closed the issue because we're not going to deal with that unless this comes back up, right? This merging V2 transactions. Like we might reopen that in the future, but that's why I've closed it and marked it as deferred. Decreasing the likelihood, we did that. tolerating the first timeout, and then there were comments, we're not actually doing the retries. But like, so this is the stuff that actually made it in. This is the stuff that's still remaining. I still need to reimburse people. We're gonna, we're dealing with that mempool persistence thing. Obviously it's on by default, but we want to capture that. And then I opened this issue to track any further timeouts or like related issues that come up that sort of tell us that this fix isn't sufficient or whatever, right? But I'll especially leave the epic and this tracking issue open for like the next, basically for this release or for at least the next week or two, just to like keep it right in front of us, make sure that this is under control, etc. Were you going to say something?
A quick info is when the broadcast does not succeed at the next startup of Bitcoin J, it tries again to broadcast the transaction. So it's not. Usually, it shouldn't be a terrible issue when it's the case that the broadcast fails. Then when the user restarts, so then it should get broadcasted again.
Okay, cool. And then you can see, like, over here in the discussion column, is this, adding a new P2P message?
Yeah.
That sort of lets the peer know about an error. That's a good example of organizing things by epic, right? But not everything is a priority. Like, hey, maybe if this keeps being a problem, this will get some priority, and it's still all part of fixing timeouts. But right now it's just off in that discussion column, which basically nothing happens in the discussion column until it becomes a priority or somebody picks it up or it becomes a bounty or something like that. Like, I actually think this is probably a bad example of a bounty. We probably should actually take the bounty label off of this, because I think this isn't something that we just want somebody to go pick up and do, right?
Not really. I mean, at least that would require quite a lot of knowledge about the trade protocol.
Yeah. It would be like as much work for you to educate them on exactly how to do it as it would be to do it, right? So I just took that out. But then, so you can see that. So let me clear that. Actually, hang on. Sorry. Do it one more time. Remove. Okay. So let me show everything again, and you can see how the bounties are coming together as well. So it's just that simple, right? If it's in the, so there's kind of an overlap here. Yeah, there's the label BSQ bounty, so people can filter by that when they're just sort of in normal GitHub mode. And that's the same bounty label across all of our repos. So people could find it that way too. But if they're looking at the board, which again, I'm going to encourage people now more and more to do, there's really a dedicated place where it's like across all the repos. This just organizes it all in one place. Like these are not just bounties. Like there's some other bounties in here that I haven't really reviewed and thought about, but these are ones that we know we'd like people to pick up and do. So as things make it into the bounty column, it's kind of like, hey, it's really, legit, ready to go, basically ready for work or something like that, right? Anyway, there's more to talk about there, but what I really wanted to focus on here is there's several things. So let's do like this, sort of Git related stuff. I think the first thing, this first like super easy thing is if we look at, say, what's a good example? Tolerating. This is probably a good example. Decrease the likelihood of, yeah, that's a good example. So you commented that you had implemented these changes by referencing those commits, but this was more work than you needed to do. Coming in here and pasting that in, much better would have been in the commit itself. Right. So if in this commit comments itself you had referenced this issue, you know how that's done? Oh, can you still hear me?
Sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
think so with the no, what's the word in English? The cross.
Yeah.
Then the number of the issue.
Exactly. So, for example, I'm sure that. So it's always happening when you merge stuff, right? Because it has like GitHub sort of does that for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, like this is a good example. C comments in 959.
Yeah.
So I'm ensuring that that this commit gets correlated with that issue, right? Showing up in its timeline. And if we look at right, this is a good example. This is a different repository, right? This is actually the DAO repository. But so let's have a look at. Right, so here's commits, right? And this issue was for creating the infrastructure for markets. And I created that issue ahead of time, set up my checklist, burned through it. And then when I actually, added the repository and so on, I referenced this issue. So it shows up. Okay. Also, like there also happened to be another issue that had been hanging around for a while. It was an old one, and it was in the GitHub repository, issues 20, right? And that was basically just kind of a remnant, I created it, like months ago. But because this was also wrapping that up, I also referenced it in that same commit with a fully qualified reference, right? bisq-network, GitHub, hashmark 20. When it's the unqualified thing, it assumes that it's related to the repository that you're committing to. But this gets really important, right? Because as we're working across Bitcoin J, as we're working across the trading API, as we're working across these different multiple repositories, being able to cross-reference them is very powerful. Mm-hmm. So basically, definitely not every commit has this or needs this. There's all kinds of, like fix a typo or whatever. It would be total waste of time to create an issue for. So, I'm not even requesting that, but like a rule of thumb, like when I'm committing and I don't have an issue referenced, I always feel like something's wrong because it's such a strong habit for me. I always go like, oh, what am I doing here, right? And then if there's it doesn't matter, and I'll just keep going. But like I have that sort of habit in there that I just know that basically if it's not referenced in an issue, it's not very discoverable, and people will no one will probably ever see my work unless they're like really watching the commit history. And when there's as much stuff going on in Exchange, right? Exchange is a busy repository. It's unlikely that people are going to see stuff or discover stuff.
I try to change my workflow that usually I'm like it was with this. While I was testing, I got insufficient money exceptions, and then I was testing it with very tiny amounts. Then I tried to reproduce it on rec test, and actually I found another bug by that. It was not the original bug first, because the bug on mainnet, where I lost quite a lot of money on trading fees with this, was caused because I forgot to make the commit to the wallet from the timeout, but this doesn't happen on rec test, because on rec test you don't get this broadcast issues. So, but I could reproduce issues with that, but that was caused because the trading, the transaction fee is much higher, like it was in the past, and that caused some edge cases with insufficient money, which is a little bit complicated to explain. But it's still not really fixed, because the problem is you make a estimation of your of your taker fee transaction. And each time when you add a new, when you don't have enough money, then you add a new input, also your funding. And when you're funding with very small amounts, first you think, you need to fund with 0.0001 Bitcoin, then you're funding this, but then the transaction is bigger because there's a new input. And so what was before with the smaller transaction sufficient is now not sufficient anymore, and you need to fund again because every input costs some money, and you you actually don't know how it will be funded. It will be funded with one input or 5 inputs. So it would need something like a future estimation how much inputs there will come with the funding, and make a safe bet, and then maybe have a change output or so. It's a little bit tricky. And and related to these issues and some other 2 bugs are in the code, I went down from fixing without really having planned to do this. So basically I would have then later needed to create, when I have already fixed and understood the problem, I needed to create the issue and references and so on. But I understand your rationale behind that. Makes sense, of course, and especially to get better base for reviews and that other people understand it. I was not documenting it really, and I mean, I documented a little bit in the code that there are still open issues with this fee estimation thing.
Yeah, you know what I run into that all the time, right? I mean, and it really is the workflow. It's just like, hey, I'm doing stuff and I realize, oh, I'm now doing a new thing or whatever. So I don't think that's going to fundamentally change. So I think you have 2 choices, right? One, I do sometimes come in and just throw an issue in after the fact, like before I push, right? And I'll go back and rewrite my commits and reference the issue, but not very often. The thing that I do more often is and this is just it's actually a more natural workflow once you get into it, is the thing that I'm doing, I'm always trying to work on a branch. Like whatever it is that I started on, I'm always trying to work on a branch. And then if there was an issue already for it, well, then it's going to be sort of related to that. But if I basically, if I do something new that I didn't intend to, I try to issue it as a pull request, and then just merge it, right? And that's like the strongest discoverability ever, because it's not just a referenced commit. It's like, hey, the pull request really shows what happened, and it got merged, and it's it could be reviewed, right? All of that stuff. It's just like your trade period starts after confirmation branch. Like, even better than having that in a branch would have been to issue it as a pull request, which can just sit there, right? But it's like super visible. Anybody can see that and come in and review it and add to it and eventually merge it or close it. But it's like totally first class when it's a pull request instead of like just some random branch sitting out there.
Yeah. I mean, that would be also my target for the future. Just I started a while ago with doing everything from my repository with pull requests and so, and it was just a little bit too much overhead at the moment, and as there was basically nobody reviewing and working on the same area, so
no, I definitely understand. So anyway, I mean, it just, if that's in the back of your head, is like, try to put references in whenever you can, then that'll help. Let's see. It's the idiomatic thing in Git is lowercase and dashes when you're naming Git branches, not trade period starts after confirmation, right? Like,
okay.
Like, and shorter is a bit better. Like, I know it's really, like, I tried to think of like, what would I name this? And it's hard, right? Because it's kind of like the whole thing, but it's, you're thinking about like when you're in a pull request view, you're seeing that Manfred Care wants to merge this branch into, right? And there's only so many characters that GitHub really shows there. So just generally shorter is better, but also just the lowercase and dashes This for somebody who's really experienced, like with Git, they see this and it gives them a bad feeling, whereas this gives them a warm and fuzzy feeling, like that the team understands Git idioms. Obviously super minor, but worth mentioning while we're here. Okay, so I started using milestones to track what's getting into releases and what's not making it in, as just shown here, right? I imagine you're familiar. I know we haven't been using them very much, but I think this can really help as we start getting more people in, right? We can like filter by, okay, what's slated for 064, narrow the whole board down to that, and like actually, manage whether or not things are going to get in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, this is basically, it should be the ideal case is that this is your release notes, right? Like, basically copy and paste this into the same. I think the way that you've been doing release notes is fine. Like, I know you're just basically going on your own commit history and then carrying over the relevant stuff. But it should be even easier, and it should be possible for anybody to kind of track what's going on in the release prior to you putting together the release notes. And this is kind of the ongoing list, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, and then this is the big one, and I'm really hoping that we can do something about this. Can we stop using development? Is there any reason that we have to keep using this now?
Sorry, it was muted. Yeah, it's this testing thing. I mean, I was using master mostly in the last weeks because most changes were either clear improvements or bug fixes or were not really risky. It's just like Christoph is working on UI stuff now, and yeah, there can be always something be broken by UI changes, and when I would merge it to master, it would require a really solid test always, and would add a lot of time for this. When he's only working, I mean, he's basically working on his feature branch, but when we are not merging often enough, then it's the risk that we are getting too far away, and then the final merge will become too troublesome. I had this a little bit with Mike a while ago with the API. I mean, at the end, it was not so much changes, but yeah, there have been cases where when it was over a few months or so, different branches, then it's had much more work for merging it. And
yeah, so I don't really see what the difference is actually, because let's assume that the development branch is not there, and that what is there is like Christoph's whatever his UI feature branch is called, right? And then there's whatever you're working on, where you're ideally working in a branch as well, and then you're merging it into master, just like you would have merged into development, right? Like that's your current workflows. You either do stuff right on development, or you merge your own branches into development, right? Yeah. So then, Christoph finishes his work, let's say, and he merges it into development. Or if he's got something long running, he's merging development into his feature branch to make sure that he's up to date, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I actually don't see any value in the development branch. Just do the same thing with master. Like it's the person with the long running branch's responsibility to make sure that they're not causing merge conflicts. Like they have to pull from whatever the.
It's mainly, for instance, when I go back to the DAO branch, I would like to merge together with Christoph. Also, those are the main workflows at the moment. That Christoph is working on the UI stuff, I'm working on the DAO stuff. Both are not really ready for master, before, especially the DAO stuff. I mean, it's always implemented in a way that they can be merged to master, basically, but it needs also testing. And yeah, so Christoph would need to merge basically from my DAO's branch, or I have the development as a kind like as the root for both, where when I feel okay, I'm ready, then I merge to development. Then Christoph can merge upstream from development to his branch. When he has something ready, he merges to development, and development is kind of like the not tested master.
Mm-hmm.
So the only difference for me is the testing thing. When it's a master, yeah, people are running from master live, so that really has to be production quality, and development can make it easier for different branches to sync. That otherwise Christoph need to tell me now he is kind of like stable, and I can merge directly from his branch to my branch, but that feels somehow not right, that one feature branch is merging to another feature branch. It's kind of like the common base for different feature branch for syncing up, which is not really tested for production ready. That's the way how I see it. And when we would not have it, we need to do it basically either in master, which would require a lot of testing effort each time when we are merging, or we would merge between across different feature branches, which I think is not a good concept probably.
How often are you merging your DAO branch into development?
Yeah, maybe once a week or something like this.
Uh-huh.
Sorry. Stupid toss. I mean, when I'm, it happens that I'm working on some DAO stuff and I find some other, or do some refactoring which affects other non-DAO code and so on. So it's not completely isolated from other stuff. I mean, of course, ideally I should make the other stuff then again on master, on development also, and merge them back to DAO. But
okay, I mean, if there's some use case here, I get. I'd have to walk back through it step by step to like really understand the specifics of the use case with you and Christoph. But I get it that you guys are like both in long running branches, and you want to have kind of a safe space to integrate with each other across those branches, and it doesn't feel quite right to merge the branches into each other. Like there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that, but like whatever, right? People have their own styles, and I guess that's fine. But here's the thing: this idea that there's sort of like this catch-all development branch where like sort of everything is supposed to go before it goes to master, but not really everything goes. And this is the critical part, the base branch for the Exchange repository is master, like the default base branch.
Yeah.
So every pull request that gets issued into master into Exchange gets issued against the base branch of master. So when you merge pull requests into development, then those pull requests don't get closed. Right, and those issues hang around.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, basically, in the past, I told people that they should make the pull request to development only, and I basically decide if it's a super non-critical or important change, which I can merge directly into master. But basically, the default should be that the pull requests go to development, and the master is because some people are running from source, and especially the Arch Linux guys, they're running directly from source. So it's basically the release. So the release added with important features which we have not made a build, but which are either important bug fixes or which are completely non-critical changes, like fixing typos or whatever, which doesn't hurt when they're already master. But basically, they should be not really different from the latest release. Nothing important different, because otherwise we should make a new release.
Okay. So so what if we have a situation like, we can have this special branch hanging around, like, call it dev or call it integration or whatever it is, right? If it's like an important part of your workflow, say with Christoph, there are these cases where you have these long running branches and you want to have a safe space to integrate them before they go to master or whatever it is. Then we can keep that around, but everything else is master. Master is the default branch. Master is the default base branch. And when pull requests come in, that's just the work that has to be done, right? Does this belong on master? Yes or no?
Yeah. I mean, most pull requests from other people are usually trivial, but sometimes, like in this release, there have been 2 small UI bug fixes, and it was just a little bit of testing. So I needed to test it, and there might be bigger, hopefully, that people are making pull requests for bigger changes, which really requires tests. And then either for merging, you let it sit for 1 month or so until we have do the final testing for the release, or we are risking to merge, or we are taking the extra effort that we are doing this testing for 1 pull request, which might take the testing longer.
And this is really what I'm pressing on here is that it's pushing work around, it's pushing complexity around, and this is all irreducible work and complexity, right? So it's a question of where do you want to pay for things and what scales better. And I think what scales better is that pull requests come into the canonical exchange repository, right? bisq-network exchange from people's forks into master. And if it's something that isn't sufficiently tested or needs to be tested, that shit needs to be tested, right? And the idea that we sort of throw everything into development branch soup and then say, well, we'll test it all, prior to the release, that puts a whole lot of pressure on whoever is basically doing the release. And it makes it so that you have to, kind of organize everybody and have these, these sort of testing sessions where you say, okay, we have to go test all of these things that are now merged, right? And we now have to sort of like pretend that we're going to thoroughly manually test them, which is, like we do a best effort kind of thing, but it's not rigorous. and I personally, I mean, look, I'm not coding every day, so like I only have so much say so here, I realize, but thinking about how to scale the organization, how to get a lot more developers involved is like, look, keep things separate. Okay, you've developed something, you have some pull request. If it sits there for the next month while we're waiting to release, yes, that's a problem, right? That's a problem because, like, maybe there's going to be conflicts and stuff like that. But whose problem is it? Like, ultimately, like, yeah, you're still the bottleneck, right? And what we need is more people who are competent to be able to come along, look at that pull request, evaluate how much testing it needs, actually merge it in a timely fashion, right? And if you sort of just eyeball stuff, give it a first pass and then get it into development, that creates no pressure for people to really scrutinize that. It's all going to be like, okay, well, just before we release, let's do some best effort testing. When if there's really a bar that's like, hey, you look at a pull request and you're like, this needs to be thoroughly tested, right? Somebody needs to prove to me that this is tested and this is safe, and then I'll merge it. Now there's pressure, right, for the person who created that pull request to prove that it's okay. This can scale, but it just heaps everything on you if you just sort of like let stuff get into development. And this idea that we do that to avoid merge conflicts and so on, I think it's just the wrong trade-off. Like, again, it's the contributor's problem right? If that thing sits there for a month because you didn't have time and they didn't sufficiently prove that it's production worthy code by writing tests or showing you how they manually tested it or just convincing you, right? If they didn't do that, then that's their problem to deal with the merge conflicts. That's their problem to update the pull request branch, merge in all the other stuff that's been merged to master in the meantime, and so on. They're the one getting paid, right? This is work. So I really don't want to just keep throwing stuff into a branch and then doing last minute best effort testing. It just doesn't scale, and it doesn't produce. It doesn't ensure quality, right?
Yeah, I agree. Basically, it just might lead more to such cases like with Cedric that he's making a lot of pull requests, and I never find the time to really integrate them. And at the end, those people are leaving after a while because they feel that their work is not really valued or not integrated, and it's just a lack. I mean, they don't feel probably that they are responsible for. Or with Cedric, I mean, we did it a little bit. We told him a little bit that he has to test it on Mac, for instance, as well. And so, but I can imagine that, or at least I will need then to educate the people and tell them exactly what they need to do, that to make it easier, that I can merge the pull requests, and so, which again creates effort for me. Like, there have been these 2 small UI changes, and I mean, it would have been easier when he have posted some screenshots, and it would have been faster for me to get what he has fixed exactly. But when I would have written it and waited for his response, it would have taken more time. Like when I saw it and checked out a little bit myself and tested it myself in 5 or 10 minutes, I have done it basically. So the overhead to communicate and this, you know what I mean. I know that it's we should get to this point. It's just a question.
Well, I mean, in that example, I actually don't see the point of the example, because the choice would have been the same if there was no sort of development branch. The choice would have been, do you write feedback to Cedric in a comment saying, hey, please explain blah, 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 convince me that this is ready to go, basically. Or do you take 5 minutes, test it yourself, and then merge the pull request to master, right? So what's actually the difference there?
Now with merging to with this case, it was not such a critical. So I left it for merging it to development, and now with testing the whole application before the release, because when I would have merged it earlier, I mean, it was not a good example because it was a more trivial change. But with the 0.6 release or so, where we had a lot of changes, big changes, it was really required that we are testing all the basic use cases, like like a normal trade where people are offline, with arbitration, just to be sure that all the main use cases are really working, and that some change has not broken anything, because there was so many changes and big changes. I mean, that's not the usual. That should be basically the exception of the usual release cycles. When we have releases like this release, which are more controlled and more narrow scope, it could, let me think a little bit. I mean, with the current changes with bitcoin and with the broadcasting, yeah, I mean, it was kind of like narrowed down tests, also because it cannot be that their arbitration are so great because of this was only in the trade process with the trade transactions and so on. So I basically agree what you said, that probably will be better and scale better when we are making it the responsibility of everyone who's doing the pull request to make it, prepare it so good that the one who is merging it has only minimum effort. Will take a while to get there to reality, and especially with casual requesters, the effort to educate them is maybe not worth it. So,
well, that's actually part of my argument here, is that with the what we want is the easiest possible workflow for new contributors, right? Which is not to say that like we want them to, we want people who are like not quality focused, you know, to be able to come along and just do whatever they want. That's not at all, right? But like I want to give prospective new contributors a very simple message: fork the repository, issue a pull request against master, right? And that's really it. It's the simplest possible workflow imaginable. There's no special branches. There's actually no feature branches at all in the canonical repository. You create a feature branch, you issue a pull request against master. That's it. Now, what happens after that is, you know, a conversation is going to happen, probably, right? Unless what you're doing is so trivial that it's just mergeable. Then we're going to give you feedback and say, this doesn't make sense yet, or whatever. And we're going to, you know, it's on you, right? This is paid work, and you're not going to get paid. It is not eligible to be paid until it is merged. Right? That's, you know, this conversation that we were having from the last compensation voting. This is a really big deal, I think. This idea that because it got merged into development, you know, now it's eligible for compensation, and that's going to like turn people off if they can't issue their compensation requests, you know, right away. No, the only thing we pay for is finished work. What the hell else would we pay for? Like, what else matters? What else creates value? What creates value is working code in users' hands, right?
I mean, there's a little bit of pressure when long-lasting work like UI work, when Chris come up with really completely changes then it will take a few months. That will be really...
I'm telling you, I feel so strongly about this because it creates the correct pressure. The correct pressure is, hey, I have this giant piece of work to do and it's going to take months to do. Red alert. That's a problem. That's an anti-pattern, right? And when the person thinks like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get compensated for months for this, good, break it up, right? It should be the extreme exception that there's something that literally takes 3 months for you to work on. And if it is going to do that, and it's so important, and it's so atomic, an atomic unit of work that takes 3 months, this requires extreme scrutiny. This requires extreme skepticism, right? And if what you come up with is, that's how I'm going to do it, and everybody agrees that well, then you're going to have to defer. That's a huge amount of risk, right? 3 months worth of work. Yeah, you have to take on the work. You're not able to break that up at all. The risk is on you, not on the DAO, right? If you can't figure out how to break up your work. I mean, I'm not saying that we couldn't somehow afford exceptions in exceptional cases, but as a matter of culture and direction and defaults, fuck no, we don't want to pay people for unfinished work. That encourages unfinished work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, I was thinking we have basically two big projects, the DAO and the UI thing. And the DAO, I'm actually trying to merge all the time into the releases also, to not have too huge changes. I mean, they're not really activated, but the code is there and so. With the UI thing, it depends on Christoph. I mean, I also hope that he's making small changes and not a huge, completely redesign of the UI, because that would be a huge risk and so. And I assume, and I'm not aware that he's planning to do this, so probably it will be the case that he's doing a smaller stuff, and we can merge it at least once a month or so.
Yeah. As long as it actually results in working code that actually adds value, then that's great, right? And look, I want to be like really clear here. It is not a problem to me at all. In principle, if Christoph wants to take 3 months to do some all singing, all dancing change, I think it's a bad idea, right? I think it probably won't go well. But if he wants to take that risk on, and he's highly confident in his ability to do that, then fantastic, right? Just don't externalize that risk on the DAO. Like, don't bother us with voting on your unfinished work. And you know, we're currently in this mode of doing, like, you know, for the month of December kind of things. That's basically an anti-pattern too, right? Like it's okay for this kind of catch-all stuff. We're all doing a lot of things, so it's just efficient to put together these monthly requests, right? But I would much rather see, you know, if there's long-lived work, that there's an ongoing, you know, compensation request that's basically not, it's a draft, you know, and that person's coming along and saying, I did this and this and this, and they don't submit that for voting until there's actually finished work in master, right? None of this is a problem. It allows people to choose the granularity that they want to work at. But the second we start paying for unfinished work, we're going to get a shit ton of unfinished work.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, one issue is that it creates more pressure on me mainly, because I have to merge the stuff. So when people 1 week before end of the month are merging all their stuff or making the pull requests, and I don't find the time to merge it, they are delayed basically with the payment. So it's a little bit, kind of like a pressure on me that I should merge it then, because they are waiting to get to be able to add it to their requests. That's a little bit a downside at the moment there, and.
Yeah, but it's all the right pressures, right? Like, that's good. That's good. There's too much pressure on you. That's the problem. There should be other people who can do this. That's the problem.
Yeah, sure.
So the solution, you know, easy for me to say, harder for you to do, but I would totally say this out loud. I am saying this out loud. It's recorded, right? The solution is, don't merge it. The solution is, sorry, you have to wait for compensation, right? And if that's causing, you know, look, this is all equity BSQ. It's not like it matters actually that you get it this month versus next month, and that's part of the reason why we're doing all of this in this you know, nerf padded world of testnet and equity BSQ, is because it's all fucked up, because we're not ready for prime time. Right? Because we need to work out fundamental bottleneck issues. And this is how we do it, by like actually adhering to a set of principles where we keep going in the right direction, not the wrong direction. We can't sacrifice quality and standards and, you know, a scalable direction for growing the DAO because it feels uncomfortable, right? Or because like it creates worry. Like, what we should do is communicate clearly. Look, Manfred's overloaded. He can't deal with your pull request. If you want to get stuff in, like, do it at the beginning of the month, you know, and do everything in your power to make this easy. Make sure you've merged the latest from master. If a week has gone by, come back and merge master into your pull request again and add a polite comment or talk to Manfred or whatever, or, you know, fucking level up so that you can start doing this kind of committing. Let's have another maintainer for the exchange repository. That's the goal, that there's another trustworthy person who's actually maintaining the exchange repository. So that, you know, that's what to do. And that will only happen through you gaining confidence in people coming along with pristine pull requests, right? And people commenting on other pull requests, doing what was your job for you because they're making it their job, and saying, hey, this pull request doesn't fly. Did you test this? And you sit back and you look at it and you go, I want that person to be a maintainer, right? That's the direction, not you doing more and feeling pressure and feeling bad. Like, so to me, it's clear. Again, it's easy for me to say, it's harder for you to do, but I'll run defense for you all day long on these fronts, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay. Let's maybe we have to communicate this to the other guys, that it's more clear for them.
So here's what I want to do on that front, actually. So like, let's kind of like zoom out for a second from that particular topic of the dev branch, and zoom way out to to this epic, right? Get more developers. So if you see what I've got there so far, and this is going to come back around to how to communicate this. This is why I'm bringing this up now. So what I have in that epic now is, what we talked about the other day, basically writing this first Medium post, starting to do these kind of tech sessions. And then I've tagged certain roles that are really, developers that we want to bring on, like dedicated P2P network developer and so on. So those are in the epic as well. But there's a bunch of stuff that's not in the epic yet. I just literally haven't created these issues. So like, this is what you see so far, the ones that are checked. What I want to put in here as well is, and we talked a little bit about this, right, is let's see if we can, talk to those guys and do the Noted podcast, maybe do Marty Bent's podcast as well. Those things have kind of been related. I don't know his podcast so well, but I think he's also been really interviewing like core developers and stuff like that. So I think it's, developer friendly podcast at least. Reach out at FOSDEM, right? Mike offered to like put up flyers. And I think that would be really cool if we can get together a cool flyer.
And sticker.
And right, stickers would be like, we got to get some sort of swag. Okay, we've got our sort of A list that we put together and reaching out to them, reaching out via the bisq newsletter and so on. There's this thing though, has come together as an idea, much like these tech sessions, right? So we get together via Zoom. You talk about the P2P network. Maybe we get a kind of diagram put together, something like that. That is a 30-minute, hour-long thing that basically anybody can come along and look at and really download into their head, like bisq's P2P network at a pretty deep level, right? And then repeat that for all the different sort of aspects of bisq technology, right? The code itself. That would be awesome. Start getting that up on our YouTube channel. So that's the idea that we had so far. And then now this next idea is let's do the same thing. Basically me doing screencasts, just me solo voiceover screencasts where I'm walking through what I'm calling DAO operations, right? Or the proto bisq DAO and how it operates. So let's talk about Slack. Let's talk about GitHub. Let's talk about roles. Let's talk about bounties. Let's talk about and each one of those. So like a 10-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute video, however long it takes to get sort of the most concise piece, like how we use these few tools to the max, right? Like that's what we do. We use these general purpose tools like GitHub and Slack, and then we use the shit out of them to implement all the ideas of the DAO, how voting works, right? Like, so imagine just a video on voting, even in our current, with a spreadsheet and that kind of thing, right? And the purpose of these is, one, very practical, right? It's like let's have something scalable where people can get into their heads how this is all supposed to work. How does this board work, right? ZenHub, and like what's all the thinking behind it? But it's also as I put those videos up and tweet about them and so on, I really see this as a huge, essentially, developer marketing opportunity, because really we're in this space that's competing for developers before anybody's even able to compete really for users. We're all competing for developers, and I think we should take that really seriously and actually address our developer audience just directly, right?
Also for our current contributors, I'm not sure if everybody is really understand very well the meaning of the roles and all this stuff. So I think it would be good to.
I'm certain they don't, right? I know they don't, because so much of this has been just enough of me just repeating and iterating and refining and tweaking until it gets to this place where it's like, I think this actually makes sense. I think this can actually scale. I think people can pick this up and run with it. And now it's sort of ready to talk about. I've done most of this stuff one way or another previously with other organizations, and now we're doing it to this like nth degree as a DAO and doing it all super public. And, you know, and it just takes some refinement time. But I think we're now at this place where it makes sense to put together those materials, yeah, for everybody who's already here, but even more so for everybody who's not here yet. And I think I have this strong feeling that if people get in their head, basically, like if prospective bisq developers get in their head two things, it could make all the difference. One is that they take on you know, our model for what bisq is, right? It's a network of bridges between the fiat and Bitcoin worlds, right? It is not a speculative trading platform. Separating those two things out very crisply, right? That's the purpose of the medium piece. That's the medium piece that I want to write first. There'll probably be other ones, but I want to like really distinguish these two things like we've talked about. So if developers start to see building a decentralized exchange as a real, true, and proper cypherpunk project, not some, let's build a decentralized Coinbase, you know, or GDAX or Bitstamp or whatever, right? Because I think there's just a whole lot of, for very good reasons, and I know you and I have talked about this, but I'm just quickly repeating it for the recording, right? So I think there's a lot of, because these things are conflated, right? Because the problem of accessing Bitcoin, getting Bitcoin and selling it and being able to sell it when you need to pay the bills, right? Or whatever it is, because that fundamental need is conflated with all of this business of speculating and making money on price action, right? Those two are not distinguished right now. It's basically a giant turnoff. Like who wants to work on exchanges, on trading platforms? Some people do, but like, the sort of most dedicated cypherpunks out there mostly don't. I think they're just not inspired by it. I'm not inspired by it, and you're not inspired by it. But I am inspired by building a network of bridges between Bitcoin and the fiat world because it's vitally necessary, right? It's indeed one of the most important things in the entire space, and it's totally, totally underserviced. So if we can just clarify that and get people thinking in that way, that's thing number one. Thing number two that our prospective bisq developers must get in their head is what it's actually like to work inside of this DAO, and that it's an attractive place where you have, you know, all of these really positive properties, right? Like autonomy. Like you actually show up and you, at least potentially, very quickly own things. Like it's basically as fast as you can possibly do it, as fast as you can get enough BSQ to bond into something, right? You own it fully and completely. Like everybody loves autonomy, right? Extreme radical transparency, which may not be attractive to everybody, but it will be attractive to the people that we want, right? Quality, like dedication to actually shipping quality stuff, right? And all of the infrastructure and processes that like ensure that. Scale, right? Like that all of this stuff is designed to scale massively, right? Like, and there are other sort of things, but when you see like the principles, the properties that we're trying to, you know, to instantiate here, and then you see that the infrastructure that we're using is, I think for a whole lot of people, they look at this infrastructure and they go like, oh, well, that's exactly the tool chain that I want to use, right? Everybody, you know, pretty much loves using GitHub. You know, Slack, yeah, maybe some issues there, but there's zero question that Slack is the best platform if what you want to do is automate the shit out of everything and have everything work, right? You know, yeah, GitHub, Slack, ZenHub, right? Like just use a super modern tool chain, implement all of these DAO ideas and like do it in a way that works. And I think if people get those two things in their head, that this is something absolutely worth building, quite possibly the most interesting thing they could possibly contribute to. And it's a great place to do work, right? Like if they get those two things in their head, then we have a real chance actually of competing for some of the best people in the space. Yeah. And we can then express all of that stuff through the YouTube videos that I'm talking about and the Medium pieces that I'm talking about. I think those are the two kind of channels, right? So this is where, you know, we started with communicating to everybody. like after our, meeting the other day, and just after this kind of like the aftermath of these last few weeks, after chaos and stuff like that. And then especially after that meeting you and I had the other day, it's really started to gel for me. And I feel like I have a clear plan about how to make this sort of priority number one stuff, get more developers, how to actually, we'll see if it works, but I have like, and that's what I'm laying out on the board is how to do it.
We have to make it work. Otherwise, it will not work. I have to wrap up in 5 minutes. I have to leave because I'm meeting a friend for lunch. But I completely agree. And is there? Yeah, I mean, I still would leave the development. Would prefer to leave it, and maybe we can rename it if it's possible. If it makes sense to something like integration, dev integration, or whatever. That's mainly the main function for me is to have some common sync node, and that we don't need to cross sync between feature branches.
Yeah,
and the rest to get everything as soon as possible to master. I agree, basically, and maybe we add when people are doing pull requests, to tell them also they should note how it's tested and how it can be tested, so it's faster. We screenshot when it's UI related stuff, so that it takes less effort. But and this reaching out to developers, that's for sure the highest priority, because when we get more and more users, and it might be easily the case when either one exchange breakdown like Bitfinex also, or when the governments get more hostile against Bitcoin, it was a really tough month, and I need to go back to the DAO, and we need to get this problem solved, that next time somebody else can work on such stuff.
Exactly.
And there's so much stuff to do. I mean, like what I found out, I mean, there's so much to improve. It's a lot of kind of like, would not say prototype level, but like I said before, these issues with this estimation, which fee you have to pay for your taker fee and for the other transactions, that would need more work, basically. That worked another week on this. And there are many, many more stuff like this, like a peer-to-peer network, the Bitcoin chase stuff, and so on. There's really a lot of stuff to improve and to make it more stable. By the way, I think a big issue with the peer-to-peer network stuff is just that Tor is unstable at the moment. Yesterday I had sometimes Tor was super slow and super unstable, also Tor browser, and then half an hour later it was much better again without any code change. So I think it's really Tor network has some issues at the moment.
Right. And, so I have that listed as possible causes. I don't know if you saw this epic.
No, I have not read this yet.
So this is the stabilized P2P priority epic, right? Yeah. So what's been going on? Dropped and delayed messages, it's basically dropped messages. And there's also this startup, right? Kind of like bootstrapping.
Yeah.
So maybe
I get more and more reports that people, especially on Windows, that they cannot start up.
Mm-hmm.
Windows, it might be that there's some Tor file locked. Yeah. The installation or so. I had on my own VM sometimes this issue with stupid antivirus software, which are kind of like blocking and killing the startup or the installation, mm-hmm. and then is a Tor file kept locked, and only a restart helps this. Or that it's just Tor is not stable and you need to restart another time.
Yeah.
And another thing is that sometimes I'm not 100% sure that some Tor files might be, there are so consensus files where keys downloaded and so on, and those files are cached usually, so they are not updated all the time. Well, I don't know exactly how they work and what's the purpose of those files, but one local dev node what I had was super unstable with Tor, and then I deleted the Tor directory, excluding the hidden service folder, and it was better. And then I implemented it already to delete all the Tor files at startup, but I got then even more issues. I think Tor probably you get kind of like, I'm not sure about the DDoS protection in Tor, but it can be that when you are behaving somehow strange as a node, that you get flagged and you get kind of like banned or deprioritized or whatever. And I think to download all the time these files, which are usually cached, might be not a good idea, and creates just extra pressure on the Tor network. So I didn't do it, but it would be another thing. Yeah, we should get a guy who is really experienced and knows a lot about this stuff and make the right decision, which file should delete it and cleaned up and which not, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, if we can articulate that as some sort of, task or research or investigation or whatever, like to do, then feel free to throw it together. In the meantime, when you see issues like this come along, like slow startup or whatever it is, feel free to like just add a comment referencing this issue, right? It's sort of like, sometimes the best we can do, right, is just something comes along, we're busy, you can't spend a lot of time on it, but at least try to create discoverability. Like, hey, we have this priority, this looks like, or we have this problem, right? Like unstable P2P. Maybe this has something to do with it. At least throw it in there so that when somebody does have time.
Later today, I will add a few issues with those things which I'm aware of and which are not implemented, and to document it.
Yeah, exactly. So just to wrap up, right? Like, as we think about, finishing up some of these fires that we've been putting out, basically, right? Timeouts and all that stuff. The question is, what are the next priorities? And we know those two, right? It's basically you working on the DAO, and that's not reflected here yet, but it should be. And I think I just kind of want to leave you with this, right? Is like, if you can start getting into the habit of observing this board, right? It's sort of mine to manage. You don't have to think about managing it too for the time being, but like this should become something like the heart of our work, right? If the board is out of order, we're probably out of order. I haven't had time to like take care of this at all over the last months. There's just been so much going on. But I think it's super important that at the very least, like no matter what else is going on, at the very least that priorities column and the all caps epics should be accurate, right? What are the most important things that we're doing? This is totally true right now. Like these 4 things are definitely the most important things that we've been working on. They are in fact our priorities, right? And we're not lying to ourselves about anything. There's not something here that's like, improve the UI. There's not even stuff here about growth, right? Because the fact is that the people who wake up every morning in a dedicated way to work on bisq are not focusing on that. Like Christoph is focusing to some degree on UI, so he should probably have some sort of priority issue like Epic here showing up pretty soon. You should have something about the DAO showing up here pretty soon. But the main thing is that if we have 10, of these priority all caps Epic issues sitting here, and there's only you, me, and Christoph working on it, say, we're lying to ourselves. There's no way that we have that kind of bandwidth, right? So my point here is that I really want to like stay true to at least this, that this column needs to not be a lie. It needs to be an accurate reflection. And we just have massive bandwidth problems right now with, and so we can get more stuff into the priority column. We can be doing more in parallel, but there has to be different faces, attached to those issues who are actually owning them and actually scaling this thing up. So just, just sort of want to leave it at that maybe.
I think I need to finish. But completely agree. I will try to 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 catch up with the missing stuff and update my stuff there as well. And yeah,
cool, man.
Hopefully we find soon more people. Yeah,
Okay.
with the growth stuff, I will try to have a chat also with Felix directly. Want to give him a little bit of background about my concerns that when we are growing too fast, that it's too risky at the moment. I mean, we're growing fast enough at the moment. I don't want to do anything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe you saw my comments on there the other day. I mean, I do think it's reasonable to do kind of like controlled experiments in USD liquidity, but we just have to know what our goals are.
Fine, but I mean, to really push, especially from resources.
I think, by the way, I know you got to go, but the thing that I think would actually make the most difference, especially on the USD side, is these payment methods, right? Whether it's Felix doing it or somebody else.
That's actually easier. So I just need somebody who do the research, and the tech spec basically implementing takes me 2 hours or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
When they're not really different to other payment methods, not the risk. It's not.
And that'll make
any developer could do it, but
I mean, those are the limiting factors to really scaling up on the USD side. Like basically, if you don't have Zelle now, you're fucked, right? Anyway, you got to jam, but all right, man.
Okay, then I mean, just quickly, I mean the ACH, I think it's too risky with chargeback, and then we don't have possibility to distinguish between ACH and wire. Because you just get the account number, you don't know how he pays the other guy. So that was the reason why I removed it. But all the other like Venmo and Square and whatever, that would be easy. All others which are more complex, like face-to-face or in cash, cash in mail, that's more experimental and would require. I mean, I posted those people who are pushing this. They should make a proposal with a deep analysis and everything, and maybe then we can implement it, but that's not I don't expect this short term. But those Venmo
I think that stuff is really exciting, and I really hope that we can do something like that. And I think it's a very good example of work that can happen totally in parallel, right? That research work, even the implementation work for that, like a lot of
I mean, implementing a payment method, it's super easy at the end. But so far, only one guy has done it once for Western Union, but it was not. It was not.
I mean, the cash and mail thing, like it could actually require new steps in the protocol, right?
Yeah, that's a bigger change for sure.
Yeah. So, but still, like that could conceptually be done in parallel. Somebody really could be putting that together. And just nice opportunities, and I think we really do need it. I'm personally excited about it.
Yeah, and maybe, I mean, Felix seems to be a specialist on this payment methods. Maybe he could be kind of like in the role for being the payment method expert, not writing maybe the specifications, but at least leading this and find the people and being the master for this when he is up to this. Let's see. Let's wrap up here.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and I will try to update this stuff soon.
Cheers. Okay.
Okay.
Hey, one last thing. Do you mind if I rename the branch, the dev branch?
To what? To dev integration, or?
I just call it integration.
Yeah, fine.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Do you know if the local branches of the people will have? Do you have to check out then the branch again? How it behaves when you have locally checked out the dev branch and?
You'll get forced basically to deal with it, because you would be able to recreate the development branch because you have push rights. Nobody else would be able to accidentally recreate it. So as long as you just change it locally, then that's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
And I can show you how to do it or
Okay. Okay. Then see you. Have a good day.
See you.
Bye-bye.